Welcome to the Blue Heart Podcast. I'm your host and conversational guide, Lieutenant Joe Pangaro. This podcast is for you, the men and women of law enforcement, because ours is a noble profession, worthy of your heart, your passion, and your life. Now, let's get to the heart of the matter. Good afternoon, everybody. Lieutenant Joe Pangaro here. I have a special guest with me today, a personal friend, a colleague, and an all-around really good person. That would be Lieutenant Ed Segarra. Ed, how are you?
Excellent. How about yourself, Joe? Thank you very much.
Very good. Hey, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. Just as a clarity, let me let everybody kind of know, how we know each other, and then everyone's going to want to know about you. So I served in a police department here on the Jersey Shore for 27 years, and in that time, I was very, very lucky to come across a lot of really talented young men and women that came through the PD. And one of them was a young guy that came on one day, Ed Segarra. And they tell me Ed was, he's a young cop. He used to be a Marine. He's a sharp kind of guy. And he was everything he was said meant out to be, and much more. So, Ed, I guess everybody just wants to know, who are you? What's your background in law enforcement before I give away all your secrets?
No, listen. First of all, not used to be a Marine, always will be a Marine. So let's start the conversation off right there.
That's right.
Any Marines listening will definitely know what I mean.
There you go. That's great.
So yes, thank you, Joe. Listen, it's an honor and a privilege to be speaking with you today. Listen, much respect for you and for our careers. And if there are probably, we could probably talk for about 10 hours just with the stories we have and the stuff we've done and things we've seen and been to. So for myself, once again, my story starts with my career in the Marine Corps. Graduated high school, of course, graduated in Keyport from Bayshore, Marine Corps for 4 years. And I lucked out because I left the Marine Corps in January of 1994 and got picked up by the Monmouth County Sheriff's Department in 1994, that same month. Started there in corrections, did 4.5 years in corrections, and got picked up by Ocean Township Police Department in October of 1998. And that's where my story truly begins. Not to disrespect my Sheriff's Department years, because I loved them, loved the people I work with. It was one of those things where my entire life I focused on being a police officer, and I finally got to meet that goal, that achievement, when I got picked up in 1998, and that's where my career started. So in that time, my 24.6 years of law enforcement with Ocean Township Police Department, started out the patrolman way, of course, but one of those things, I feel that I moved on pretty quick within my first 3 years, which is the requirement to be an FTO. I picked up FTO. I was an FTO for 2-3 years. At that point in time, you have to be 5 years on before you're eligible for a sergeant's test. Took the sergeant's test at my 5-year mark. Got picked up for sergeant at my 6-year mark. During that time, so many things happened during that time. I was, of course, a patrol sergeant. Then basically got brought down to the Detective Bureau and started the SAU unit, which is the Special Assignment Unit. More of quality of life issues. We had a lot of college parties. We had a lot of narcotic issues going on. We had a lot of car burglaries going on. We had a lot of going on. And you know that because you were there with me. You were there directing me. You were there showing me what to do. So for, I want to say about 2 years, I was doing the SAU thing as far as doing the sergeant aspect of it. Then from there, moved on and got promoted again, made lieutenant. And from lieutenant, I want to say that was my 12th year in the police department, give or take. Then moved on to patrol, took over training, took over firearms, took over scheduling, and I'm sure there's a bunch of other things.
I was going to say, is there anything you didn't do while you were there?
Yes. So, of course, you know how it works. When there's budget cuts and there's shortage of fundage and promotions, you end up by yourself. which you
Absolutely.
ended up. I know there was a time there that you were down in that lieutenant's office by yourself. So found myself down in the office for by myself for a while. So basically took care of all those jobs and descriptions and stuff like that. Then got moved over to the dreaded accreditation lieutenant. So,
Oh boy.
so I'm sure anybody in the law enforcement world knows what accreditation is and knows what it entails. So I was sentenced to what we call the closet, and that you sit there by yourself. You have your own little office, and you deal with the accreditation process in and of itself. So let me go backwards a little bit. During the time, from the time I was a patrolman to the time I was a sergeant to the time I was a lieutenant, I was also part of the Monmouth County SWAT team, which is called MOCERT here in Monmouth County. And for those who don't know what MOCERT is basically a county-wide SWAT team. Basically what they do is they take personnel from the 23 jurisdictions in Monmouth County, and it's a volunteer service. Basically, you come, you try out for it, you test out as far as a PT test, a written test, and a physical. And what happens is you make it on. You're basically part of the Monmouth County SWAT team, and we train twice a month for 8 hours to 10 hours a training session. And we respond to any critical emergency situations within the county of Monmouth County. And also we would assist with FBI stuff as far as any calls they had. We had we're not to say contracted. Say we were there. If they had an incident in Monmouth County, we would be their go-to.
Right, kind of like an MOU or like an agreement. Everybody had agreements.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, as I'm listening to you, Ed, I don't mean to cut you off, but as I'm listening to you, you have such a varied background. We're going to get into specialized things with the SWAT. But I remember, when you came on, there was a story about something that happened when you were a sheriff's officer and happened in our town. I think, was it at the 7-Eleven? we were having a party on the roof across the street. And all of a sudden, this sheriff's officer comes in, and some guy with a gun. And what happened? What was that? That was crazy.
Okay, so we'll go back. We'll go back to that day. That was when I was a sheriff. I was a sheriff's officer still. I was. God, this is a long time ago. So yes, it was. I want to say it was right before Christmas, give or take, when this happened. Somewhere, maybe November, give or take. I don't know. I'm trying to remember the timeline. But I remember we were setting up our Christmas trees and stuff. So across the street from my old apartment was a bagel store, and this bagel store usually opened up around we'll say 2-3 in the morning to make the bagels. And next thing you know, me and my roommate, who's also a sheriff's officer, hear 3, 4, 5 pops, like pop, 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 and we're like, what is that? So look out the window, and here comes a woman running across the street yelling, he's trying to kill me, he's trying to kill me, he's trying to kill me. This case is closed, so I can say this stuff now, so I'm not giving away anything that isn't supposed to be said. He's trying to kill me, he's trying to kill me, he's trying to kill me. I run out to the area where I saw the woman run towards, which was the 7-Eleven across the street. I run outside. I run out. I find a guy standing in front of the 7-Eleven, and I'm like, and this is the best part. This is why I can tell the story now, because it's all out there already. I go, did you see a woman run, and there's a guy chasing her? Yeah, that was me. This is what this guy says. That was me. So I'm like, holy crap! Okay, so I grab him. I actually had my gun drawn at the time, and I grab him. And this is where the funny part comes in, because once again, I wasn't known in Ocean Township at the time. I was a sheriff's officer. So I go to grab him. I put against the car, and at that point, the first Ocean Township officer arrives and draws down on me and the accused at the time. And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, I'm on the job, and I still remember verbatim what he said. He says, I don't know who you are. And I'm like, okay. I said, listen, so I'm trying to pin the guy down on the car, and I'm like, I'm going to try to reach for my identification. and I reach for my identification. And as I reach for my identification to pull out my badge to show him that I'm on the job, he tackles me and the bad guy himself. So, long story short, what he did was this guy, which I may have rushed through the story a little bit, but what happened was he arrived at the bagel store, highly intoxicated. He had a automatic 22 rifle with a banana clip in it, and he basically went in there, was going after his ex-girlfriend or girlfriend at the time, I'm not really sure. Ended up trying to shoot her in the store. A couple rounds went off in the store. She runs out the front door. As she ran out the front door, he shot at her, and that's the rounds that we had heard. And those rounds were actually found in the side of my building next to my window. So,
Yes.
thank God.
Yes, and that's great because I was one of the detectives that came out that night, me and Chucky, and we were looking in the building and we were finding bullet holes all over the place. I got to tell you, though, that conversation, that whole thing came up later on when they were looking to hire, and they were looking at you, and they're like, does anybody have any interaction with this fellow? And we said, well, yeah, actually, we do. We know he can handle himself. He was in the middle of a shootout. He got tackled by a cop. He got guns pointed at him. It worked out pretty good. I think he's okay. Plus, he had a cool apartment where there was parties on the roof, so that was good. That was really excellent. So
yeah, it all ended up very well. She was safe and sound, and, we got him in, and he got sentenced, so we're all good with that.
Outstanding. So Ed, as we look over the career type of thing, I know when you were in the SWAT team, that was I was on the county team for a while. I was a hostage crisis negotiator. So I started out in our local team. I was on the SWAT side of it when I first became a cop, and then over time, the negotiating really just kind of fell into my bailiwick. That was the kind of thing I did, interviewing and talking to people. So I kind of switched over. And I worked with the Dykeman boys out of Middletown. They were the team, and I joined the county team. That was quality individuals there. They're just really great guys. But they convinced me to, hey, stay here with the negotiators. This is where we want you. So I did. I really liked it. But the SWAT team, you go out to some crazy things, and a lot of times it's, hurry up and wait, because you don't know if something's going to go or not. But
yes.
You ended up being a SWAT commander, from what I understand. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And
yes.
what did you do as a SWAT commander? What was your responsibilities to the team and everything else?
So basically, just to give you a rank structure of the team, basically you're either an operator, one of the patrolmen in a SWAT uniform. Then you end up being an assistant team leader, and then you become a team leader, and then if you make it any further, that is the commander spot. Mm-hmm. So the commander spot is basically, you're the lead guy. You're the person who's dealing with everything. And for us, thank God, we had we had 3 commanders at the time when I was on. Before that, it was 2. Where basically the reason why you had 2 was because we're an on-call team. If you're off, you're on vacation, you always need someone backup. So what we did was basically build a redundancy in there where if you were off, you had somebody backing you up. But as far as the commander position goes, you were the person making the decisions. And when I say this, there's 2 ways to make decisions. One is from the command post, and one is at the doorstep. And that's where your team leader comes in. But for the commander post, you're dealing with, public information. You're dealing with the police department that you're responding to. So say, we responded to a call in Mattawan. So I'm the person who's dealing with either the chief of police, the captain, whoever's in charge of the incident for the actual town that we're responding to. Because long story short, whatever town we go to, they're still in charge. But once it's handed over to the command aspect, the MOSERT aspect, the SWAT aspect, we're in charge of it until they turn around and say, either A, do what you're doing, or B, we don't want you here anymore, which that never has ever occurred. But as far as the commander spot, you are in charge of overall decision making. You decide the gas plan. You decide the tactics that are going to be used. You decide whether you're going to negotiate, whether you're going to gas, whether you're going to make entry. It's all the decision making process right there. So it was one of those things where being part of the SWAT team was probably one of the main highlights of my entire career, because you were basically the chief of police. Mm-hmm. for us at the time, we're either between 42 and 46 people, and that's your town. And the joke I always used to say was, when someone needs help, they call 911 and the police come. When the police need help, they call 911, we come.
Right.
So that was always the big joke.
Well, you were obviously well suited for that, and I think it's because I heard this. Somebody told me one time that once you're a Marine, you're always a Marine. Somebody I know told me that very recently. And so you think your Marine background helped you in that position?
I think it did, because I think my Marine background helped me throughout my entire career. It is one of those things where, to this day, even just talking about it right now, I'm getting a chill down my back, as far as saying I was in the Marines and being part of Marines, because you're always part of it. It never, ever leaves you. And it's one of those things where you bump into somebody on the street and they're wearing a Marine emblem, they're saying Semper Fi, or how you do, always, so it's always been a part of me. And I think, I know that my military background got me to where I was in my career, and got me through it and helped me every step of the way, because the discipline it puts into you, the pride it puts into you, the respect it puts into you, the ability to overcome things that you never thought you would be able to overcome.
Sure.
That's what's instilled in you in the Marine Corps. And not to say anything bad about the police academy, but I had zero problems with the police academy.
Well, I was just thinking about that. I'm saying to myself, you went through Paris Island, and then you go to the police academy where, cops say, it was so terrible, and the drill sergeant, it was in my face. And I said, you must have been eating a bag of chips while they were chasing you around in the police academy.
Listen, it was one of those things, and one of my best friends, Rob, he showed up one day. He showed up the first day of it, and he's wearing a tie with a short sleeve shirt. And I go, you can't wear that. And he's like, well, what do you mean? I go, you don't wear that. They said you're supposed. I said, no, don't do that. So I walked up to him. I took off his tie. I straightened them all out, and thank God I did, because there was someone else who wore a tie there, and they got ripped. So he's like, thank you. And ever since that moment, we were best friends ever.
That's excellent. I remember those days. They were, but you're right. Like, law enforcement is kind of the same thing. You have that brotherhood and sisterhood wherever you go. Somebody knows you're a cop. Hey, I was on the job. Here I am. There's that courtesy. Kind of not the same as the military, but military-like. You know another cop. You look out for other cops. Now, I had something I wanted to ask you about, because I don't know if you know Anthony Ganji. Anthony is he's current in corrections. He's a big deal in corrections. He'll tell you he's just a guy, but he's a high-ranking individual. He works at the prison, and he also does Tier Talk, which is a radio program. He's got thousands of followers in corrections. And one of the reasons that Anthony and I gravitate together is because I always saw corrections officers as law enforcement officers. And I know a lot of people don't. They say, "Oh no, they're not. They're jail guards." And I say, the reality is, they work the toughest precincts in America. They are locked in with the people that you and I lock up, and they're stuck with them 24/7. So, having had both sides of that equation, would you agree with that, or would you disagree that corrections is law enforcement?
100%. So, a lot of people don't realize that probably the only thing that separates corrections from law enforcement is a part of training, which is the 2C and also domestic violence. Those are the two things. And if you want to do vehicle operations, doing EVOC and stuff, yes. But those are the only separations in between a law enforcement officer, police officer, and a corrections officer, law enforcement, of course. But those are the only two things. Those are the only 2 or 3 things that separate us.
Right.
It's one of those things where we get to carry off duty. We have the same law enforcement powers and arrest powers as a police officer does. So it's one of those things where that was always the big joke. We're jail guards. We're cage kickers. The only people that can call a cage kicker is a cage kicker. Don't listen. No one can call us cage kickers except for ourselves. That's we save that. You want to call me a corrections officer? That's absolutely fine. The cage kicker thing, that's a joke between us, and we're allowed to. But absolutely, it's one of those things where the respect of a law enforcement officer carries over to a corrections officer. And it was one of those things where I've always done it. And let's put it this way, I've never actually run into a law enforcement officer, a police officer, who didn't give a corrections officer the same respect, the same courtesy, the same overall listen, hey brother, what's going on?
Well, that's good to hear. That's good to hear because
that's sort of
I know that's that because I've written a lot of articles and I've been on Anthony's shows and I've done things with him. Is that's a hurtful thing for the men and women. They work some hard stuff, and I always saw them as law enforcement. I'm glad to see that you do as well because they absolutely are law enforcement, and we all stick together, right? So as I'm going down the road here. So who is Ed Segarra as a person? You know, what are you all about as a person? Besides law enforcement, being a Marine and an American hero and you know, an American cop hero and all those good things, arresting bad guys, shooting at their girlfriends. Who are you as a person? What are you all about? What do you like to do? What are you into? Do you have family? You know, what do you got going on?
So married, 2 kids. I think what I was and what I am now are 2 different things. You know, I was always one of those guys who I got married later in life, enjoyed multiple stuff, loved traveling, loved doing, you know, being away, doing stuff, being outside. I think the best part of any day is waking up and enjoying that day. So I've always been that person who, once again, go back to Marine Corps days, I've always loved, you know, taking care of myself, taking pride in myself and my appearance and the way I look and the way I physically feel. So I've always been one of those people that, you know, to this day, even retired, I still wake up at 5:30 every morning and work out. My wife's like, what are you doing? Why don't you stay in bed? You know, so I'm like, no. I said, I need to do it. So it's one of those things where I've always taken that pride and carried it on to this moment. But like I said before, Ed, the family guy, and Ed, you know, the nickname Fun Ed, you know. I always love being around people. I love being with my friends. I love spending time with them. I love spending time with my wife. I love spending time with my kids. You know, just before we started this, you know, I just got back from playing golf with my 12-year-old son on his day off from school. And it's I'm always a person who's trying to make the best of every day. You know, it's one of those things where my daughter's like, "Can you come push me on the swing?" And I'm that guy who's like, "Yeah, no matter what, I'm going to do it." You ask me, I'm doing it because, as you know, as a father, it's gone before you know it, and you're not pushing them on the swing anymore. They're not asking you anymore.
That's right.
So I think my focus now in my entire life is my kids and the best that I can give them, and the best I can give my family. Doesn't mean I don't do stuff myself. I tell you now, it's one of those things where I'm still trying to better myself. I'm in the middle of trying to take my CPP right now, so I'm studying for that. And I'm trying to take a Spanish class in between that, you know, doing that. And I'm always trying to better myself.
Yep.
Always trying to get a little more.
Yep.
A little more.
Let me jump in and let everybody know here. I mean, we heard, you know, Ed's background, and I think all of us can appreciate, you know, first of all, serving his country, serving his community. And knowing Ed personally, there's a lot of people out there you say, yeah, you know, that's a good guy, that's a good girl, but there's always a side of that person that you'd say, yeah, you know, there's something there that's off. I could tell you, Ed is just one of them all-around really good guys, professionally, personally, the whole way. You could always count on him. Always had a smile, Ed. I can remember, you know, no matter what we were doing, working, no matter what assignment you got to do, or you know, when you have to run in this door, go in that door, cover that spot, you were always smiling, excited to do it. And that made it fun to work with you all the time. So people should know that. When it comes to that, the other side of this coin is that part of what I do is I teach and train. I have a company teaching and training, Pangaro Training, True Security Design. And I know you're a trainer also. So one of the things I've done is asked you to come on board and bring your skill set to the men and women of law enforcement across the United States. Because now we do remote training on Zoom, like this kind of a thing, and other platforms. We do live in-person training, and we also do our subscription training where we go on and we have video training. And we've asked you to jump on board because you're that kind of guy and your skill set. As a trainer, I know when I got put into it, I was asked to teach a little bit about narcotics when I was a detective. I thought, that's cool. I'll come in and teach the guys and girls what I know about a little bit of narcotics. It was kind of fun. But when I became lieutenant, one of the jobs they gave me, they backed the truck up on me, was, hey, I know you like kicking doors and taking people to jail, but guess what? Now you're going to be the training officer. Have a nice day.
Yes.
And I had to say, I took it to heart because how many classes have you gone to where you sit there and you melt into your chair because the instructor is boring, doesn't really know the material. You have clerks that are in charge of narcotics work or homicide work, and they're they're favorites of the chief, and that's the only reason they're there. And I said, I'm not going to do that. So we've made ours very lively and exciting. And having a guy like you come on, I think, is going to be great. How do you feel about training? I ended up loving it. I think it's a great way to pay back everybody that helped me in my career and taught me, good and bad, how to do the right thing. How do you feel about training?
Well, it's funny because it's going to be hard to put in words the way I want to put this. But let's put it straight up and simple. It is the most important part of law enforcement. 100% the most important part of law enforcement. With that being said, from an administration point, it is the first thing that goes when you deal with the budget, when you deal with timelines. How many times in your career, and I know in my career, when you have a training day and they're short on the road, what do? They take the guys from training. They don't call somebody from overtime for overtime. They take the guy from training or girl from training. And I think training is the weakest part of law enforcement right now. And I hate saying that because coming from a training officer to a training officer right now, it is the weakest part of law enforcement right now. And that right now is, it's just horrible to say. Yep. Because I've always focused on training. I want my people to be the best they can be. I want them to have the most up-to-date knowledge, whether it's case law, whether it's tactics, whether it's the ability to talk to someone, whether it's, gender stuff, understanding genders. They need to know this stuff. And it's one of those things that once they're out of the academy, that 5 months, they start you out, here you go, here's 5 months, come in, and oh, by the way, the next now 30 years, you're going to use what you used in the academy. No, it has to be updated and changed and and challenged. And it's one of those things that is the weakest link, I think, in law enforcement at this point in time.
Well, I don't think anybody who does training would disagree with you. It is the one thing that they do pull from. I know when I was the training officer, they said, here's your budget for the year. And I looked at that number and I said, yeah, but we got 65 cops. How can I train 65 cops on, well, do the best you can? So what ended up happening is you have a couple of people go to some really good things, a couple of other people go to a couple of things that are okay. Then you look for the free things, and then the training just does get lost in the sauce, unless it's its thing. I ended up trying to change the training that we were doing at our police department to make it updated and better and more exciting and fun. And it was a mindset, and I really ended up enjoying it. And trying to make it better, and that's where I created the company. And it's been that kind of thing. We use role players whenever we can to make the training come to life. You teach somebody something, and then you have them actually do it. Instead, we all sit there and we learn, oh, that's good, thank you, Mr. Ed, I get what you're saying. You go home and that's it, you forget it. When you actually have to use it, that's when it really becomes part of you. So having you jump on board with a passion like that, because that's what I hear in your voice is a passion. I have a passion for that too, for making sure when they walk out of a classroom, I always say, if you take one thing away from today, one thing you didn't know before today that can help you, then I feel I've been successful. If you get 10 things, boy, that's a home run for everybody. Mm-hmm. So, but something you didn't know when you walk out of here. So that's really important. What type of things do you see yourself teaching? What are you going to be teaching? Have you taught before? What topics?
So a lot of the topic I've done is more on the tactical side. I've done room clearing. One of my main certifications is emergency response to, of course, critical incidences, but school incidents, active shooters. That's one of the big things. That's one of those things. I started a company on my side, Life Safety Solutions, turned around, and that's what we did. We went to private sector companies and taught them how to respond, what to do. I know one of the things is that I've read from you is basically chance is not training. You can't just hope on chance and pray on chance that you're going to survive or something like that. So that is one of the big things I do is the active shooter training, the emergency response, firearms, of course, also supervision. That's probably another world to even go into is the supervision and leadership, because from work with me, that I am the person who is, I define the term lead from the front. I've never not been that person. I will never tell someone to do something that I've never done. and I would never, ever, ever take credit for something that someone's done, even though it may have been my idea, my workings, my guidance, everything. It's one of those things where being a leader means take a back seat to everybody else.
Yep. Well, and what you're talking about there actually is, one of the things, I teach a leadership course and I've taught it for years, and we just contracted with the state of Connecticut to provide it to all the officers in the state of Connecticut, so I'm very proud of that. I submit to a philosophy of leadership that I call servant leadership. Basically, the biggest philosophy is the higher you go in any organization, the more you owe to the people below you. It's one of those things where I don't care if I'm eating dinner. If you need to speak to me, I'm going to push the dinner out of the way and talk to you. That's my responsibility. How many times I've walked in and had something serious to talk about, and the supervisor's busy on the phone talking to their girlfriend or their wife, or they're busy doing could you come back later? That's not how that works in my world. If somebody needs you, they need you, and you have to be accessible to them. So leadership, and we see all across our world today, there's a lack of leadership on every level, in every organization, and it's really scary and sad. And that was something that there's no doubt about it. You are a leader, and you have a lot to bring to that table. So when I listened to you and we first had conversations about what you can do, we do a lot of active shooter stuff too. So having you on board for that, because when we do it for the police departments, they always want to do some kind of drill. They want to practice what they learned. And we do it. It's me and a couple other people, but to have somebody with your skill set's going to add so much to that value to those officers doing that. That's going to be great. But the one thing that I saw when I first talked to you, because of your background in going into these buildings and all that, was how many times does a patrol officer end up going on a call where there was shots fired, a violent domestic, a suspect is in there or something, and they have to go in there by themselves, and what can they do tactically to protect themselves and still move forward? Because, we don't have that option of going, well, this is dangerous, I guess I'll wait in the car. You have to move forward, and you jumped right on that. And I believe you wrote an article for us for the subscription on exactly that. So what's your thoughts about an officer has to go in by themselves?
So solo officer response it's unavoidable. It's going to happen. I don't care if you come from a 60-man department or a 10-man department or a 500-man department. You're going to end up in a situation by yourself. That's Murphy's Law. It's one of those things where you better be prepared for it, whether it's mentally or physically by actually doing it and going to training for it. But it's inevitable. It's going to happen. The first thing you need is that mindset that you are going in by yourself. And you must know that the second you get or respond to it in your head, think about, play it off in your head. Start going through the situation. You don't even know the situation. You don't know the scene. You don't know anything. What you know is what dispatch gave you. There's an armed suspect with an armed barricaded suspect in the middle of a domestic, beating up his wife, whatever it is. I'm simplifying it there. But your urgency is not your life. The priority life, people need to know that, and that's a very important thing. The priority life, you're basically almost the last person. The bad guy's the last, you're second to last when it comes to that. So what you did when you took that oath is you swore to uphold the law and protect others. And you're going in. You're going to have to go in. But know that the decision process, know how to go through that process of, okay, what do I need to do now? What do I need to do now? But it has to be quick. It has to be quick. When do I slow down? Do I stop at the threshold? Do I listen? There's so many things that go on during that process. And, I talk about it in a fast manner because I think in that manner. I think very quickly. Like I'm going through situations. I'm going through, what do I need to do now? Cover and concealment. Listen for what's going on. What's my approach? Am I at the right location?
Right. There are a ton of factors. There's a ton of factors. And when I talked to you about it, I said, you're the perfect guy to write an article about that. And then we're going to put a class together, which is basically going to be having you teach them all of these things they need to think about. And then we're going to put them through activities where they're going to have to go in and respond in different buildings, warehouse building, an apartment building, stopping a car in the middle of the night by themselves, rural, they're all by themselves out there, and have them go through it. When I teach people anything that I teach them, especially when it comes to serious and dangerous things, I tell them this: you don't want the first time you think about what to do in a dangerous situation be when it happens to you, first time.
Yes.
You want to have considered options, so you at least have some idea what you can do. And that's why we teach the kids how to do lockdown drills, so that if there's a bad man that wants to kill them, they know how to go save themselves. You can't just expect people to know that. So I think that's really going to be exciting. I'm looking forward to that. And I want everybody to know that I have complete trust and faith in Ed, and I don't give that to a lot of people, but he's that guy. So when you see me out there pushing things coming to you about a class that has Ed in it, you're going to want to sign up twice because you don't want to miss it. That's how good it's going to be. Now, Ed, I took a lot of your time, and I appreciate it. I want to end on a funny story here because the other thing, as you know, I write a lot. And I'm writing a tale book now of, we're calling it Tales from the Road. And these are just scary stories, funny stories, emotional stories, because we all have them from law enforcement, and people are moved by them. Well, there was a really brutal double homicide in my town. And a guy killed his grandmother and his baby mama. He cut their heads, their hands, and their feet off. It was really a horrific scene. It's actually something I'm working on a class on right now, and I'm also doing the crime novel, and it's called Through the Gates of Hell. Well, Ed was involved with that case as well. Ed was one of the first officers on scene when the call came in, and he arrived there, and I'll let him tell you the punchline, but I'm going to do the build-up. We had gotten a call that there were 2 bodies in a house. That was the call that came to dispatch. There's 2 dead bodies in this house. And at the time, we had a heroin unit out there because heroin people used to be in the morning. Now they're 24 hours a day. But at the time, we had this narcotics unit rolling around, and Ed was part of it, trying to catch these morning junkies. And they get the call, and they go over to this house, and there's this killer. For whatever reason, he comes out of the house, and the other officer knew him, took him into custody, and then Ed and another sergeant go in and are going to search the house. Now, this was a big house. It was dark. It was obviously there was a sense of foreboding at this house because we knew there were 2 dead people inside. The suspect, when he came out, was covered in blood, chunks of bone, hunks of meat. We knew something very, very gruesome had happened in that house. And Ed goes in with another sergeant, and the other sergeant searches the downstairs. And Ed, I believe you went upstairs, didn't you? And,
yes, so we both went upstairs. Yes. After we searched the downstairs, we both went up.
Yes, and then you came across a family member, so to speak, in that house. What happened there?
So, as we're searching the house, like you said before, it's a very big house. There was an art easel leaned against a door, and I look back at the sergeant, and I'm like, "Is that being used to hold someone in right now?" And we're like, "Okay, this, there may be somebody, in there or something." So we get ready. I'm like, "Listen, I'm going to open it. I'm going to go in and clear it." Basically giving them all the tactics and stuff like that, and get ready to go. And open the easel up, open the door, and as we're about to step in, this cat, this is like the horror movie thing. This cat jumps out. It was the attic stairs going up to the attic. This cat jumps out. And basically, long story short was I turned around and I go, "Holy crap," using other words, I almost smoked that cat.
Now, when you say the horror movie, that is a classic scene in every horror movie. So when you came out and told us the story that you popped this door open and this cat meow comes jumping at you.
Oh, my Lord. And it was like that. It didn't like just walk out like a little kitten. This thing was like meow and jumped out. Whether it was trapped in there for days or whatever they did to him, it was almost the first casualty of that situation.
Yes. And I find that in all of these kind of things, like I said, very brutal, gruesome crime, horrible thing for the victims. But there was that moment in there that people talked about later on, and I wanted to end on a lighter note here because
of course,
there's a lot of things going on here. So listen, Ed, I want to thank you for your time. We're going to have you back for more podcasts, more radio shows, and we're going to get this training together. We're going to see Ed in 2022. Anybody that's coming to training between now and the beginning of next year, you might see Ed pop into a class to say hi. Ed, thank you very much, and thank your family for letting us have you for all this time.
No, please. Thank you.
All right, we'll catch up with you next time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Joe. I appreciate it.
Lieutenant Joe and the Blue Heart Podcast Network would like to thank our sponsors. Blue 360 Media. You can find them at www.blue360media.com. And Medical Essential Diagnostics. You can find them at www.med-nj.com. We would also like to thank the Blue Heart Network production team, led by Senior Executive Director Todd Pangaro. Be careful out there. Do what's right.